Most people think possession is one of football's most attacking ideas. Hold the ball, create chances, score goals. Simple. But the greatest possession teams in history were trying to achieve something far more disturbing. They weren't simply moving the ball away from their opponents. They were slowly taking away something far more valuable: belief. Every completed pass forced another sprint. Every failed press demanded another recovery. Every passing sequence reminded opponents that they were chasing a game they could no longer control. Long before the final whistle, many teams had already accepted a painful reality. They weren't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to touch the ball. At the heart of that philosophy stood a midfielder who rarely looked spectacular. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the strongest. He didn't overwhelm defenders with dazzling skills or endless goals. Yet for over a decade, he quietly controlled the rhythm of football's greatest matches with a precision that made entire teams feel powerless. While everyone else admired the beauty of his passing, Xavi Hernandez understood something much darker. Every accurate pass was a psychological victory. Every triangle was another reminder that the opponent was arriving too late. Every minute without the ball slowly turned confidence into frustration, frustration into panic, and panic into surrender. People remember Xavi as one of football's greatest passers, but perhaps they were watching the wrong thing. Because Xavi wasn't trying to control the ball, he was trying to control the people chasing it. Long before Xavi Hernandez became the conductor of Barcelona's greatest team, he was a child who understood football in a way that couldn't be measured by strength or speed. Growing up in Terrassa, Spain, football surrounded him from an early age. His father had played professionally, and conversations at home were often about the game itself rather than the players within it. While many young footballers fell in love with dribbling past opponents, Xavi became fascinated by something less obvious. He wanted to know why space appeared, why it disappeared, and why one simple pass could change everything. When he arrived at La Masia, that curiosity became his greatest advantage. Physically, he didn't stand out. He wasn't taller than everyone else, nor was he blessed with explosive pace. In another academy, those limitations might have defined his future. At Barcelona, they became almost irrelevant. La Masia wasn't searching for the strongest player. It was searching for the player who understood the game before anyone else did. Xavi learned that the ball should always move faster than the opponent, that your first touch should solve tomorrow's problem rather than today's, and that football was less about running into space than creating it for someone else. No one shaped that philosophy more than Johan Cruyff. He believed football was a game played with the mind before it was ever played with the feet. And in Xavi, he recognized a player capable of carrying that idea into another generation. Cruyff once remarked that Xavi had everything except a strong physique, but then added that he didn't need it. His greatest strength was that he always seemed to know where the next pass belonged before the ball had even reached him. While others saw an undersized midfielder, Cruyff saw a footballer who could organize chaos without ever raising his voice. That education quietly changed the way Xavi viewed possession. To him, keeping the ball was never an achievement in itself. It was a method of controlling everything around it: the speed of the match, the positioning of teammates, and, most importantly, the emotions of the opposition. Every completed sequence wasn't simply another statistic. It was another reminder that the opponent was reacting instead of deciding. Xavi wasn't learning how to pass, he was learning how to make other teams play the game on his terms. When Pep Guardiola became Barcelona's manager in 2008, many people believed he had introduced a revolutionary style of football. In reality, Guardiola wasn't creating something entirely new. He was perfecting ideas that had been planted years earlier by Johan Cruyff. And at the center of those ideas stood Xavi, not because he was Barcelona's best athlete, but because he understood the philosophy better than anyone else on the pitch. Guardiola didn't need Xavi to play faster, he needed him to think faster. That distinction changed everything. Most teams use possession to move the ball toward the opponent's goal. Xavi used possession to move the opponent instead. Every pass asked a silent question: will you press or will you wait? Step forward and Barcelona would play around you. stay deep, and Xavi would patiently recycle possession until another passing lane appeared. There was no correct answer. Every decision simply created a new problem somewhere else on the pitch. Opponents believed they were chasing the ball. In reality, they were chasing decisions that Xavi had already made seconds earlier. As Barcelona's passing sequences grew longer, the physical exhaustion became obvious. But the real damage was happening in the mind. Players began pressing half a second too late, midfield lines stretched apart, defenders stepped out when they should have held their shape. Simple mistakes started appearing, not because the opposition lacked quality, but because frustration slowly replaced clarity. Xavi understood that concentration is one of football's most fragile resources. If you force an opponent to think, sprint, recover, and think again for 90 minutes, eventually the mind begins making choices the body never intended. That was why Barcelona's dominance often felt so inevitable. They weren't simply completing passes, they were quietly rewriting the emotional rhythm of the match. By the time many opponents realized what was happening, they had already spent an hour reacting instead of acting. Their confidence had been replaced by impatience, their structure by desperation. And against Manchester United in Rome, the entire football world would watch Xavi turn possession into something far more unsettling than a tactic. He turned it into psychological warfare. The 2009 UEFA Champions League final should have been decided by two of Europe's greatest attacking teams. On one side stood Manchester United, the defending champions, built on pace, aggression, and relentless transitions. On the other stood Barcelona, a side many believed relied too heavily on possession. The expectation was simple. United would press high, disrupt Barcelona's rhythm, and force mistakes. It sounded convincing before the match began. Xavi spent 90 minutes proving why it would never happen. From the opening whistle, Barcelona's passing wasn't fast for the sake of speed. It was precise for the sake of control. Xavi constantly repositioned himself to become the easiest passing option, receiving the ball before pressure could fully arrive and releasing it before pressure could fully exist. To the crowd, it looked effortless. To Manchester United, it felt impossible. Every time they believed they had trapped Barcelona, another passing lane appeared. Every time they accelerated to win the ball back, Xavi had already shifted the point of attack somewhere else. They weren't chasing possession anymore. They were chasing certainty. That was the hidden genius of Xavi's football. He understood that defenders and midfielders don't only become tired because they run. They become tired because they keep making decisions that lead nowhere. Press left, the ball goes right, close the passing lane, another triangle appears. Step toward Xavi, he has already played the pass. Every failed attempt quietly eroded confidence until hesitation replaced conviction. Manchester United weren't simply losing control of the match. They were losing faith that control could ever be recovered. By the final whistle, Barcelona had not just won the Champions League. They had demonstrated that possession could become a form of psychological dominance. Xavi didn't overwhelm Manchester United with spectacular dribbles or moments of individual brilliance. He overwhelmed them with inevitability. Every pass carried the same message: you are arriving too late. What happened in Rome wasn't a one-night masterpiece. It became the blueprint for one of the greatest eras football has ever witnessed. Barcelona conquered Spain and Europe. Spain conquered international football. Different managers stood on the touchline. Different teammates entered and left the squad. Yet, one constant remained. Whenever the match threatened to become chaotic, the ball found Xavi, and with it came order. His achievements are almost impossible to separate from the style he represented. Multiple La Liga titles, UEFA Champions Leagues, a FIFA World Cup, 2 UEFA European Championships. Yet trophies alone cannot explain why Xavi is remembered with such admiration. Great players often dominate through actions that everyone can see. Goals, assists, tackles, spectacular dribbles. Xavi dominated through something far less visible. He dictated where opponents ran, when they pressed, and eventually how they felt. He wasn't controlling the ball for 90 minutes. He was controlling the emotional temperature of the entire match. That is why so many elite midfielders describe playing against him as mentally exhausting. They weren't physically inferior. They were intellectually overloaded. Every pressing trigger seemed to fail. Every tactical adjustment solved one problem only for Xavi to create another. Football usually rewards the team with the better athletes or the better finishers. Against Xavi's Barcelona, it often rewarded the team that made fewer emotional mistakes, and Xavi built his entire game around forcing those mistakes. Perhaps that is his greatest achievement. Football has always celebrated possession as a statistic, a percentage displayed after the final whistle. Xavi transformed it into something much more powerful. He proved that the ball could become a psychological weapon capable of draining patience, confidence, and belief, long before it created a goal-scoring chance. By the time opponents realized they were losing the battle, they had already lost the war. Football still searches for the next Xavi. Every generation produces gifted passers, midfielders with extraordinary vision, flawless technique, and impressive passing accuracy. Yet despite all of football's tactical evolution, very few have recreated the feeling Xavi gave to opponents. That is because people have spent years trying to imitate his passes instead of understanding his purpose. Xavi never passed the ball simply to keep possession. He passed to change the emotional state of the match. Every sequence of passes stole a little more patience from the opposition. Every completed triangle asked defenders to sprint one more time. Every failed attempt to win the ball planted another seed of frustration. By the time Barcelona finally attacked, the goal often felt like the ending of a story that had been unfolding for the previous 20 minutes. The finish was merely the reward. The real victory had already taken place inside the minds of the players, chasing shadows. That is why Xavi's influence extends far beyond Barcelona or Spain. Modern football has embraced pressing, transitions, and vertical attacks, but the greatest teams still understand the lesson he left behind. Possession is not valuable because it looks beautiful. It is valuable because every second with the ball forces the opponent to live without it. And in football, there are few feelings more exhausting than knowing exactly what your opponent is trying to do while remaining powerless to stop it. So when people remember Xavi Hernandez, they often remember hundreds of passes, endless triangles, and one of the greatest teams ever assembled. But perhaps those passes were never the real masterpiece. The masterpiece was the silence they created, the moment an opponent stopped believing the ball would ever be theirs again. Because Xavi didn't just teach football how to keep possession, he taught football that the strongest battles are sometimes fought inside the mind.